All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be breaking down week 7 here for you guys, giving you guys my first look build, my initial core plays for the week, some values that we are getting due to some injuries, and then some potential stacks that we can be on as well. But first, we're going to go ahead and get into a quick recap from week 6. It was another good week. Let's go ahead and do that. So guys, week 6 core plays, just a quick recap of this. Very solid, guys. So as you can see, really only one miss in terms of like the video content I gave out to you guys in terms of core plays. I was telling you guys I was going on my way to target, but this doesn't even really count. Puka Nacua missing 4.8 due to him getting injured. I typically don't really count that. That's just someone getting injured and just didn't work out. So very solid week. Another good week in the books. But that's kind of what makes this week fun to me, week 7 fun to me, because the last 3 weeks, guys, they've been all pretty darn straightforward. It's been pretty easy to tell you guys who are going to be the top plays. As I've stated literally the last 3 weeks, it's just about getting the correct combination of players correct. And that was the tough part about the last 3 weeks, because we were getting too many good plays, right? Too many good options. Where this week, it feels like a true DFS week where we kind of have to finagle some lineups, have to make some strategic decisions roster-wise. Now, maybe that will change because I am doing this video on Monday afternoon before the 2 Monday night games take place. So, for example, guys, the Chicago Bears and Washington Commanders are playing each other. I see this pricing for Bill Krosky-Merritt. If he ends up just getting like 70% of the work tonight for Monday Night Football, and it's not due to Chris Rodriguez being out, we're probably just going to be loading up on him because he gets that great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. And then maybe Caleb Williams ends up having another good game as well, where we end up just having to roster him in a very good matchup against the New Orleans Saints as well. And he's pretty cheap. Okay, so those are some things we were waiting on for Monday Night Football and kind of just get some confirmation on. But let's go ahead and break down the slate, guys. So looking at the slate, we'll start with the quarterbacks here. So obviously Daniels does get a very good spot there going against the Dallas Cowboys defense. Okay, we know that the Dallas Cowboys have given up a bunch of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, 4 more points than the next worst team, which is the Miami Dolphins, okay? The Dallas Cowboys are giving up an average of 27 DK points per game. And again, with Daniels, if he goes out and plays well, with Terry McLaurin out and also Deebo Samuel, questionable, a little bit banged up, and then he potentially gets McLaurin back or Deebo Samuel a little bit more healthy, then yeah, we're definitely going to be targeting Daniels against the Dallas Cowboys. So he is looking like someone we could be paying up for. And that's been the thing lately. We really haven't had a strong quarterback to pay up for most of the season. We've had a lot of soft pricing at the quarterback position. Last week I was telling you guys Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Bryce Young were some of my favorite plays, and that ended up working out as well. Drake May was someone I ended up getting to in cash. Actually, that's just kind of how it worked out. Sorry, I misspoke. It was Drake May I specifically like for stacking purposes. Sam Darnold is someone I like specifically for cash purposes. Obviously, we could play him with JSN a decent amount. So this was a slight pivot build that I made because there's a little bit of weather concerns for the LA game as I was doing the write-up. And this would have ended up working out anyways. Like a lot of good builds there for you guys on the 9-to-5 write-up. And real quickly, I do want to talk about that game between the Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys that we're going to have next week. This is projected to be a massive scoring game, guys. So 53.5 total points. Let's look at the point spread as it currently sits. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. So Washington 2.5 point favorites. That is going to be the highest scoring game on the slate. And if we look at Dak Prescott at his price, I'm a little bit surprised he's actually cheaper than Jaden Daniels because he has been playing at really, I would say, an MVP level. He's kind of having the Joe Burrow type season thus far where his team is probably not going to make the playoffs, but you could argue has played the best out of any quarterback throughout the league. And if you guys are doubting me, just watch the film. We could even go back to the game against Philly. That was a primetime game that most people saw. He played great. We just saw CeeDee Lamb have multiple drops in terrible situations in that game. He has been a stud. Okay, it's pretty clear. I would say he's been the best quarterback in the league thus far this year, which is something I did not think I would say. I honestly didn't. Now, some people are going to say Baker. Some people are going to say Drake May. Some people are going to say Jordan Love. As a Packers fan, some people might say that. I might entice people to think that some people are saying that. Although he's been playing well as well. Obviously, you got Patrick Mahomes in there, Josh Allen, whatever. He is certainly in the conversation. I'd put him at the top of the list, especially when you consider that he's been without CeeDee Lamb, one of the best receivers in the league, if not the best receiver in the league. And CeeDee Lamb is someone that could end up being back in this game. And if he gets CeeDee Lamb back with how good George Pickens is looking, how good Ryan Flournoy has been, Jake Ferguson has been a stud obviously as well, that is pretty darn crazy. And so this is finally the first slate in which, again, we might consider paying up for a quarterback. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we have to because we are getting Caleb Williams at such a cheap price tag for someone that also draws a pretty good matchup going against the Saints. Now, I will say the matchup with the Saints is probably not as good as maybe what it indicates in regards to what I'm trying to say here is the Saints give up a lot of passing touchdowns, 14 passing touchdowns, okay? Whereas they rank out middle of the road in regards to passing yards. They've given up 14 passing touchdowns, which is the second most in the league, okay? And so that is how Caleb Williams would be successful, is going to be with throwing for multiple passing touchdowns. But that being said, the Saints are pretty poor stopping the run as well for quarterbacks. We know Caleb Williams can rush the football. The Saints have given up the fourth most rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks as well. And so that to me is where Caleb Young ends up being a pretty darn solid play. That is assuming he plays well on Monday Night Football, or not terrible. And that's assuming everyone's healthy. That could end up changing, but he's kind of the first quarterback I'm putting into my builds. And then from there, who else can we look at? Well, I will say J.J. McCarthy or Carson Wentz, if one of them is healthy, I don't mind them at their price tag. Obviously, they have a very good offense there with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison now back and healthy. It is worth paying attention to whether or not Kyler Murray is going to be active, because if we get Jacoby Brissett at 4.5, that is just simply too cheap. The Packers defense has been very strange, where in the first half they played great, and then in the second half, over the last 3 games, not very good, giving up some big chunk yards plays, and you would kind of imagine that would be something that would happen in that game as well, where the Packers get off to a lead and then the Cardinals are having to play from behind. And I think that is something that could easily happen, guys. So you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who is currently questionable there for the Arizona Cardinals. That's going to lead to some value for us as well. But when you take off arguably their second best offensive player right now, as well as Kyler Murray, I would say Trey McBride's currently their best offensive weapon. But you take those 2 players off, obviously that's going to lead to a more pass-heavy script, which would then lead to, let's put it this way, Josh Jacobs being another core play for us again this week. Just been safe and steady, okay, this whole season. And now he gets another good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, a team that's averaging 24 DFS points given up per game, guys. A team that is giving up a lot of receptions to opposing running backs as well. 5th most in the league at 31. And Josh Jacobs has been someone that's been involved in the receiving game thus far this season. And so that creates him to have a high floor. And thus I view him as a core play again this week. But let's finish out the quarterbacks here. Just my final thoughts on it. Dylan Gabriel's a little bit interesting just at 4-4. He ended up throwing the football 52 times, and now he draws a pretty good matchup against the Miami Dolphins. I kind of feel bad for Dylan Gabriel, where the Vikings defense has been pretty solid. The Pittsburgh defense, pretty good overall as well. And I honestly feel like, and I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on, I think we are seeing why teams didn't want to draft Sanders, because it just ends up being a distraction. The conversation around Dylan Gabriel should be he has been encouraging. He's probably been better than people expected. But because of Sanders being there, people just want to see Sanders play. And so that's the conversation. So this has been kind of an eye-opening moment for me, where I was questioning why teams wouldn't draft Sanders. And now I'm like, I understand it now. It makes perfect sense to me now, because Gabriel, again, not playing great, don't get me wrong, but he hasn't been terrible. He is playing, though, like someone that doesn't want to lose his job. Okay, he's playing too safe. He does need to throw the football downfield more. And maybe that's a message that's received, and he starts to force some passes down the field. And I'm bringing him up mostly because I do like a stack and opportunity that we are getting with him. So David Njoku ended up leaving that game, guys. He is currently questionable. We'll see if he ends up playing. If he ends up sitting, then one of my favorite tight end plays on the slate, which you could use separately, but I probably wouldn't. I would say only if Njoku's out. We're looking at Harold Fannin. Okay, so Fannin ended up playing 80% of the snaps last week, with David Njoku leaving the game in the 4th quarter, basically at the start of it. So Njoku only played 44% of the snaps regardless. So interesting there. And then we obviously saw Fannin get 10 targets in that game. Njoku was someone that was heavily targeted in Dylan Gabriel's first start. And with Gabriel throwing very low ADOT, average depth of target, to his receivers, that means Fannin probably should be in for a pretty high floor. And so I'm kind of currently treating Fannin as a core play as well. And so now let's go ahead and get into the rest of the running backs here. So Jonathan Taylor at this point, guys, on this slate as well, but at this point, he almost just seems like someone we should be clicking into all the builds from this point on, maybe until he draws a more difficult matchup. If he draws like a very tough matchup, we'll consider not clicking on him, but especially on this slate. Okay, again, last slate, the issue was we were getting too many good plays at cheaper price tags. I wanted to pay for Puka Nacua instead, or CMC. So again, we had CMC, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Aston Genty, Kyron Williams, all in good spots. And so it was like, why are we forcing him with Jonathan Taylor when we have other options that are a little bit cheaper that hold, not as much upside, but almost as much. Josh Jacobs obviously was my core play of the week by far. Like just in general, as I mentioned a bunch, it was the secondary options after that. Now on this slate, we are not really getting anyone that, makes us feel comfortable rostering them. One thing that we need to pay attention to, though, is Chuba Hubbard. Is he going to be active in this game? I kind of expect him not to be active, guys, just because of how well Rico Dowdle has played. And there's a lot of conversation around what the running back split should be. Is Chuba Hubbard still going to be the number one running back? And just what the workload would be. And my expectation is that Rico Dowdle has clearly been the best running back, if not their best offensive weapon thus far this season. McMillan's been good as well, the rookie receiver. Like my thought at the start of the season was that Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard were the exact same player talent-wise. And at the start of the year, Chuba Hubbard was the incumbent starter. So you gave him the starting position. And then it was about a 60-40 split. And if Chuba Hubbard's back in this week, I expect it to be a 60-40 split again, but with Chuba in the 40%, Dowdle in the 60%. And obviously, he's been good in the receiving game as well. That was kind of the role he was expected to be in regardless. And I don't see how you go away from him. And so he is someone that if Chuba Hubbard's out, we're probably looking at him. He's probably still a little too cheap, which sounds weird to say. Breece Hall, guys, interesting spot for him as well. He ended up playing like 70% of the snaps. He got a workhorse workload in a 2025 workhorse workload for a running back, getting 22 rush attempts. Not a single freaking target against a team who their weakness is giving up receptions to running backs. That is where you should have been. I know everyone, not everyone, it was an early game, but a lot of people watched that game, and it was a bad game to watch for NFL fans. Justin Fields was terrible, but how do you not scheme up plays to Breece Hall in the passing game, or Isaiah Davis for that matter? That was strange. And so I don't know if we can just trust the Jets at this point. That's bad, right? And so from there, guys, like Jordan Mason, I'm fine with. It just kind of feels properly priced. Bill Krosky-Meyer is the one I'm most interested. Again, we need to see what happens with him on the field on Monday Night Football. Does he end up getting more work? Because if he continues to get about 50% of the work at 6'1", even in a good matchup, he is someone that becomes just a GPP only play. You can't really consider him a cash play or a core play. He is still probably someone we would look at if he's getting 50% of the work and still 16 opportunities in a very good matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. But we do need to be a little bit cautious because, let's face it, Jeremy McNichols has looked good thus far this season. Chris Rodriguez has looked good for the most part this season as well. It wouldn't be surprising to see them keep splitting up the workload to try to keep, all of them fresh throughout the season. And that, to me, is kind of why they're probably not going to give Bill a lot, like 80% of the snaps, really maybe this whole season, trying to keep him healthy. But still, he's someone that's interesting. Junkins is also in an interesting spot. So he gets a very good matchup against the Miami Dolphins, guys. The Miami Dolphins are a DST that's obviously been very defeatable via the run game. On average, they're giving up 28.3 DFS points to opposing running backs per game, 806 rush yards, most in the league. Only 2 rushing touchdowns, so kind of strange there how that's worked out. Giving up a ton of production to opposing running backs in the receiving game as well, 270. And we do need to call out the game total for this game as well on the point spread. Okay, so 40.5 total points, very low scoring game, but a close game. Okay, so the Cleveland Browns are actually favorites in this. It's a little shocking, right? I mean, it's because of their defense, but that's a little shocking because their defense is really good and the Dolphins' defense is really bad. That's a little shocking. But let's just assume that's correct. Junkins should be in for a much bigger workload. Okay, he only ended up with like 50. Let me double check. Okay, he ended up with 40% of the snaps. Okay, only 51% of the early down snaps. They went with Dylan Sampson, 18% of the snaps. Okay, which was interesting there, I thought. Jerome Ford ended up getting 40% of the snaps. Okay, so it was much more of a split there. Now, they were playing from behind for most of the game. Again, this is a game where you would think it's going to be more run heavy and they're going to be able to get Junkins involved. This was my worry at the start of really the season in general. But then we saw how the Browns were using the running backs as well early on the season. And so that was always my worry with Junkins when he was coming back from his, not coming back, just active to the roster, was just how many snaps would he get. And it seemed like he was going to be in for a workhorse workload, even in that game against Pittsburgh, because it was a low scoring game, because he had gotten that in games that were blowouts against Detroit. games where they're playing from behind. And so that is very interesting to me. I think he's going to be one of the better GPP plays. I just don't know if we can play him in cash. Another player that kind of caught my attention as well, again, we're doing this video before Monday Night Football, is DeAndre Swift. I think if he ends up playing about the same amount of snaps that he's been getting, let's just say 60 to 75% of the snaps, if that still holds, then he is just too cheap. He's kind of a very solid shoulder shrug play. If you like a high floor play, if you guys are closing out your builds, he ends up being a very solid click for us on this slate. Like we would be basically locking in, let's just say around 10 DFS points and around 15 opportunities at 5.7. To me, that's very appealing on the slate, especially when we have a lot of question marks at the running back position. He's kind of like the lowest priced player that stood out to me running back wise that we could still feel good about. Now, there are some situations to talk about, like Tajay Spears ended up actually out snapping Tony Pollard. He looked good last week. He's someone that can get used in a game where they are playing from behind. It'll be interesting to see how they end up attacking defenses with Calvin Ridley out. Will it be like Tajay Spears getting a little bit more snaps and more production in the receiving game? We'll see. And then from there, we do need to talk about the running back situation for the Arizona Cardinals. So Michael Carter ended up getting a decent amount of work in this game, guys. So still ended up with 14 opportunities. There was a report that came out Sunday morning, though, that said Bam Knight was going to start. And he kind of was treated more as the number one running back for sure. He ended up getting the valuable rushing attempt on the goal line. And he did end up out snapping Michael Carter. Okay, he ended up with 37 snaps. Michael Carter ended up with 32. Now, I am seeing they ended up like leaving the game late in the fourth quarter. I don't think that was anything injury related, or else they would have recorded that. If he does end up, maybe there is something there. Again, I don't think it would be, but Michael Carter at 5K, again, the workhorse workload would be very appealing. Amari DiMercado did end up leaving that game early as well. So don't be surprised if Bam Knight and Michael Carter are both, getting a decent amount of work. I don't think we're really considering them for DFS purposes, but it is worth calling out that for 2 straight games, Michael Carter has gotten 5 targets and Bam Knight only 2. Now, Bam Knight's been having more explosive plays just in general. I think that's why they want to get him the football more. He also had a very good preseason. But I think it's worth calling out that the Packers are going to be 6.5 point favorites in this game as well. So it is going to promote more of a pass-heavy script. So I do think it would be appealing to be on one of those running backs at a cheap price tag where they could have a high floor, getting some passes in the receiving game. So noteworthy, probably not going to be the spot that we need to get to, though. So again, if Garrett Wilson is out, Mason Taylor benefits a decent amount, especially in this matchup against the Panthers, who have given up an average of 17.6 DFS points to opposing tight ends per game. They've given up the most receiving yards at 444. They've given up 4 touchdowns as well, which is the 3rd most in the league as well. Last week was a difficult matchup going against Denver. We knew that. Okay. Again, 1 target's terrible. Justin Fields needs to play better. And again, I would like Tyrod Taylor more for his pass catchers for Mason Taylor. It is worth talking about, though. Mason Taylor, guys, ended up playing 96% of the snaps. Garrett Wilson, 84% of the snaps. Arian Smith was actually ended up playing a decent amount as well. He'd probably be the player that benefits the most with Garrett Wilson out, snap share wise, but Mason Taylor would probably be the one that benefits production wise. So from there, we scroll down. McMillan gets a more difficult matchup. Jalen Waddle, I don't know if I necessarily want to be targeting receivers against Cleveland too much, although I think this is going to be more of what we can expect from him throughout the season. Now, with him being the receiver number 1, high target share, going to have a high floor. If Quentin Johnston's going to be out, guys, then Lab McConkey just becomes an easy click, I think. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 100 receiving yards. Great game for him, obviously. I don't think Johnston's going to be out, but if he is, worth mentioning, McConkey is the play. Now, we got to talk about this under 6K range because it is loaded with great plays. Okay, so let's start with Courtland Sutton. We knew that Sauce Gardner had been pretty good in regards to stopping receiver ones, but more importantly, just number 2 pass catchers have really benefited in the matchup with the Jets. And I kind of nailed that to be Evan Ingram, little self pat on the bat there. And that's kind of the way to attack the Jets, just as an FYI. So it wasn't shocking that Sutton ended up having a bad game. But 3 targets was a little bit shocking there. I would have thought he would at least have 6 and probably 3 catches. But this game against the Giants is obviously a great game. This is a game that we should be targeting, a matchup that we should be targeting. The Giants are giving up the most receptions to opposing receivers thus far this season, and also the most receiving yards this season. They're giving up the second most DFS points per game as well at 39.6. And so obviously, according to Sun, the receiver number one, you would expect him to have a good game. I was actually pretty shocked at this price tag. I feel like he should be $400 more expensive. Now, that being said, we are getting some other shocking plays as well. The first one that really stands out to me is Rashee Rice. So, he was suspended. He wasn't injured. And you just expect him to be all systems go, I would imagine. Now, there is a difference between like conditioning and game conditioning and just being ready to go for a full game. So he could end up having his snaps limited. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And it's a little bit risky, but I was shocked that Xavier Worthy is actually more expensive than Rice. I would have flipped it. But at this price, like 5.6, he is certainly someone we need to be considering. Based off of reports, if it says that he's going to play and not be restricted at all, then he's someone we might consider in cash. But to me, at this price, he's just one of the better GPP plays currently. Again, that could change based off of information that we get throughout the week. Another play that I really like, who's been very safe and consistent, if you guys have watched the lineup builder videos and whatnot, Olave has typically been a player that's been in the builds because he has had such a high floor. The data loves him, okay? Look at this target share, 10, 11, 6, 14, 10, 12. Every game over 10 DFS points. Now, finally, he gets a good matchup going against the Chicago Bears. Again, this could change on paper. Washington Commanders are banged up. Terry McLaurin's out. Maybe the Bears actually play pretty well defensively. Maybe that changes a little bit, like how appealing of a matchup this is. But overall, I don't think it will. And regardless, this is still like his best matchup thus far this season. And so I would expect him to have a really good game as well, to continue to have that high floor. Now, another play that actually could be in for a little bit more snaps is actually Matthew Golden. So if you guys didn't catch it, Dontavian Wicks ended up leaving the game in the third quarter for the Green Bay Packers, who's their receiver number 3. Christian Watson is someone that maybe would be active for this game, but I just don't think they're going to rush him being back. They activated his window, the 21-day window, and so he could be back. I just think they're going to wait another game as well. And so if those two things end up happening, Wicks is out, Watson doesn't play, Matthew Golden becomes one of the better plays on the slate just in general because he should see a little bit more snaps. But what I want to show you is what would make him appealing just in general. Okay, guys, so Matthew Golden's lined up right here. Obviously this is just a small play, but finds the soft space, gets upfield, makes a couple of defenders miss, and honestly, I very good football IQ play there. This play is awesome, guys. Watch the late hands that he has on this catch. You might not be able to see it all too well there, but let's just rewind that real quick. Late hands, the defender's on him, okay? The defender's on him. Great ball by Jordan Love here. It's the late hands. The football's right here. If he puts his hands up a little bit sooner, this pass is getting deflected. The defender's right here. Late hands, catch on the sideline. Big play actually in the game there for Matthew Golden. This next play was honestly a little bit better. Okay, so he's at the top of his route right here. Okay, he has a decision to make. He sees the soft spot. He sees where he needs to go. Okay, very good football IQ play. Snaps it to the 40-yard line here, and it ends up being wide open. 30-yard line here. Ends up being wide open. That was a big play as well. And then this last one just shows you his athletic ability, finds the hole, makes the defender miss, and gets some extra yards there as well. One more play does basically the exact same thing where he's getting positive yards after contact. Very solid game film from him. And that's one of the things I like to show you. I like you guys to be able to see what I'm saying. Sometimes it's not, I can't always just say, oh, he's getting open a bunch. Like, he's looking good. The ball just needs to come his way. At least we finally saw it last week where we saw the athletic ability. And as well, guys, Jaden Reed, he is still out, and that is why we have seen Matthew Golden get some of those rush attempts. And so, yeah, for him at that price tag, that's certainly something I'm still looking at. Now, we are still getting some other plays that we can consider as well. So if Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be out, and hopefully we can, this sounds weird, hopefully we can get Jacoby Brissett as a starter. Zay Jones was actually the receiver 1 in replace of Marvin Harrison Jr. It wasn't Michael Wilson. Okay, Zay Jones ended up playing 79% of the snaps. Marvin Harrison Jr. left the game with like 7 minutes left in the second quarter, only playing 23% of the snaps. Zay Jones, 79% of the snaps. Michael Wilson, 75. For what's worth, Greg Dortch, 44. We saw him end up getting 8 targets. 8 targets, guys. Okay, that's appealing. And again, this is a game where they would likely be playing from behind, and he had 13 DFS points. So he'd be someone that we would be considering if Marvin Harrison Jr. is out. Actually, one of the better values probably on the slate if Marvin Harrison Jr. is out. And then as well, if CeeDee Lamb is out, we are probably looking at Ryan Flournoy as well. He ended up playing 69% of the snaps last week, so very much someone we should be considering at 3.9 for a player that had 6 targets, still had 6.3 DFS points. Obviously had a very big game 2 games ago against the Jets. It'd be interesting to see if he's actually played himself into more playing time. Like Jalen Tolbert still ended up playing like all the snaps, but really not doing anything. And so it'd be interesting to see if he's actually played his way into maybe more of a 50-50 split with Tolbert. And then just real quickly, just a side note as I'm thinking about like a receiver potentially being out. Puka Nacua, guys, if he ends up having to sit, you guys know who the handcuff is. I've already told you guys this a bunch, but it would be Jordan Whittington. He ended up playing like 90% of the snaps last week. Just if you have Puka Nacua and you're worried that he's going to miss, I haven't really seen any reports confirming anything. He'd be your number one priority pickup if you have Puka Nacua, because he could provide like, I don't want to say Devontae Adams production, but a little bit less than that. I could see on a PPR perspective, Whittington averaging 10 PPR points. So did want to call that out. But that's only if Puka Nacua is out, and if you're worried that he's going to be out for 2 games and you need a player. But I've been calling him a handcuff for quite some time. So wanted to talk about that. And then another spot that we have to talk about, guys, is that Calvin Ridley left the game with a hamstring injury. Never came back in that game. He got injured early in that game. So I'm expecting him to sit in this game. It'd be very shocking to see him be active. And so who is going to benefit the most? Who can we maybe look at as a play in replacement of him? Well, it's not going to be Tyler Lockett, guys. Only played 33% of the snaps, so worth calling that out. IU Manor, probably. He ended up playing 93% of the snaps, only 5 targets. Don't necessarily like him as a play for this slate because he's priced at 4.2. But he's fine. Like he'd be a shoulder shrug play if you're closing out your builds with 4.2. You could play him. Van Jefferson ended up just taking over the role for Calvin Ridley, which is annoying because if you just give this production to Calvin Ridley, who was a player that I ended up getting on a decent amount as we progressed. Yeah, I ended up on him as a high exposure play. It's always tilted when you see something like that, but he'd be someone that we're looking at as well. 3.2, that's certainly too cheap for a player that would probably get 6 targets and get, again, about 80% of the snaps. DK is someone that, continues to make solid plays overall, just in general throughout the game, but he only ended up playing 55% of the snaps. I do think as the season progresses, we're going to see IU Manor and DK play the most, but in regards to like value, I thought it was worth calling out, but we're probably just looking at Van Jefferson. All right, guys, now we're going to go ahead and jump on into the tight end. So, yes, Trey McBride, I do think is going to end up being a better play if Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback, ended up having 11 targets, 8 receptions, a good game, scored a touchdown. It's almost like the ability for Kyler Murray to rush the football hinders his throwing performance, and probably just honestly can't see players as well. We've seen Tua struggled like that thus far this year. Maybe that's happening with Kyler Murray there. Tight end wise, though, we got to pay attention. If Brock Burrows is out, we're looking at Michael Mayer as a potential value. I don't think we need to do that, though. Tucker Kraft ends up getting another good matchup here, guys. Strange usage, though, okay? 2 receptions on 2 targets, 43 receiving yards on a very impressive touchdown. Get him more involved. He's playing a bunch, basically not leaving the field 90% of the snaps. Kind of annoying there. That's just the Green Bay Packers offense. They're going to spread it out. That's just their offense. But he's someone we can certainly look at in GPPs. But I think how we're going to be attacking this slate, tight end wise, is someone like Mason Taylor, who's priced at 3.4. I already mentioned Fannin. I'm kind of currently viewing him as a core play if David Njoku is out. But we also have to talk about Gadsden. So Gadsden seems to have firmly taken over that tight end number 1 role, guys. Ended up playing 73% of the snaps. He was on the field for 79% of the dropbacks. Now, they did run out basically other tight ends. Tucker Fisk played a little bit, 42. Will Dissly, 41. Tyler Conklin only played 5% of the snaps. But Gadsden getting 8 targets with Quentin Johnson out was eye-opening there. And again, if Johnson's out, I don't think he will be. Someone like Gadsden would definitely benefit from that as well. That shouldn't matter too much. I think he's going to be someone that we still look at, priced at 3.3, but he would get a bump if Johnson were to sit. And so you guys already kind of see the roster construction that I'm going with here. Obviously, Panthers DST is really the DST that I'm looking at right now. Let's close out this build to give you guys a first look build. Let's see what we end up on here. Caleb Williams as our quarterback. DJ Moore right there, 5.2. I mean, that's pretty darn good. That works out pretty well for us there. I like that build. Pretty solid build. Pretty high floors here, right? Sutton, Olave, Golden should be solid. Tough to go against this one. Let's build one more, though. So I still think Caleb Williams, just as price tag currently, I think we want to look at him as a play. I do still think Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, we're going to be paying up for those 2 plays. And then let's just assume Bill plays 65% of the snaps and Chris Rodriguez is active. Then he ends up being a pretty good play. Receiver-wise, I still think we're just going to go with the values here, guys. Sutton, Olave, but then we'll get a little risky and go with Rice there as well at 5.6. DST wise, I still think we're trying to pay down, but we're not really going to be able to do that now. Again, I think the Panthers right now are the best DST that we can run out for this slate. And so just a slightly different look from the one we just gave you guys, just to give you guys a different look. I like that first lineup a decent amount. Would be like Rattler paired up with Olave. Obviously, we typically want to do a stack there. Again, that's their best matchup of the year. I'm kind of okay with that. Then we're going Gadsden. Had to go with Giants DST to make it work, but I really want to see what it would look like with Rice and then Bill in a lineup as well. Definitely more of a GPP build, but an interesting one. I think this one ends up being pretty darn solid as well. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Give a like, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell so you're not missing out on any of the good coverage. If you guys like access to any of the tools available on 9to5sports.com, typically for NFL DFS videos, I'll give you guys a look at the 9to5 lineup builder, but because it's Monday, not really worth it to do that just yet. But that's included in the $10 a month membership, as well as prop tools for NFL and several of other sports. And then also we have fantasy golf tools, all available for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.